Hello, welcome to Leadership Advancement Mentorship Podcast, the podcast that showcases the price point that leaders are paid in their leadership development, and also how mentorship has shaped their life. With me today is one of my friends and one of the great leaders in the Women in Leadership League. And welcome with me, Oluwatoyin Puddicombe. How are you?
Nice. Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah. So please, can you introduce yourself to the viewers and the listeners? They would like to meet you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, prior to this, I would have started by introducing myself as an HR professional because what I do does have to do with career and helping people chart a path for their career. But I think having developed better understanding of myself and become more self-aware, I would describe myself as a wife and a mother, a career woman who saw a need and rose to fulfill it. On shaky knees, I would say, I believe God gave me a task and I took it up. It's been so wonderful since then. I've done things that I never knew that I could do, to be honest with you. Awesome. I was safe in my safe world and I took a step and then it's been forward ever since.
That's awesome. That's great. Great to hear that from you. Now, tell us, what is the greatest lesson? That greatest is an emphasis. What is the greatest lesson you have learned in your life as a leader? The greatest, not one, the greatest lesson. Extreme.
Okay, I would say that thus far, the greatest lesson I've learned is that we can live a life of no limits if we don't put those limitations on ourselves. And every time you take that step to, ask that question you were reserved to ask, take that step you didn't think you could take, meet that person you never thought you could meet. Every time you overcome the fear and break that barrier, you begin to live a life of more. So if it's difficult for you to achieve some certain things, you need to ask yourself, what limits am I placing on myself? What beliefs have I allowed to hold me back that it's preventing me from attaining this goal? And the more you're able to break down those barriers, the more you're able to live a life of no limits.
Wow. I really love that, living a life of no limits. I think I'm going to make it the topic of this podcast. Now, the question is, what barriers have you overcome personally? And because the way you are talking about it, it seems you have actually overcome some barriers. So, and I believe when we share our wins, and we gain people respect, but when we share our flops, fumbles, and failures, we win people's affection. And I believe these two are very important in the life of a leader. So what barriers have you overcome as a leader that you want to share with our viewers, and how they can also overcome such barriers? Thank you.
Okay, so let me say that there have been many, but I'm only going to talk maybe about three. I think the first barrier I would say I faced is believing that having spent about, let's say 10 years having children, because I do have 5 children, I didn't have much to offer anymore in terms of making an impact in my career. That was the first barrier I had to overcome. Most people who were my age at the time had gone way ahead of me in my profession. And it seemed like there was no way I could do anything meaningful. So I could just, sit in my corner and, be quiet and just love my husband, love my children, serve my God in church and not expect more. But when there's something inside of you that just doesn't let you go, that thing that keeps you up and keeps on saying that there's more to you than this, there's more to you than this. And so I decided to put my fears aside and just take that bold step. And it was really bold for me because I'm not a risk taker at all. So everything that has happened is really, really God's grace that has brought it to be. So that was the first limitation I had to overcome. So the second one was that in my career, I felt that people had gone so far ahead of me that there was no way I could catch up. And this was at a point where I was going to have my 5th child, which was extremely unexpected. And it made me feel like it was dragging me back, like there was something working against my moving ahead in my career, And but I can tell you that between when I had her and now, I've experienced such a phenomenal what Pastor Paul would call a quantum leap in my career. I mean, it's literally from people not being known by anyone to being known by quite a few people. I mean, I wouldn't want to brag and say, I mean, everybody everywhere knows me, but the truth is that compared to where I was coming from, which was relatively unknown, this is something that is beyond my imagination. And God being God, it doesn't do things small. Anything you've seen, it's like it says to you, you ain't seen nothing yet. So it's like you come to a point, okay, good for you. There's more to come, So I think that was the second one. The fact that people have gone ahead of you doesn't mean that you're condemned to sitting at a particular spot. Obviously, it's not a question of competing, but it's just a question of running your own race to see that you can achieve, you can make an impact.
And reach your own potential.
Exactly, and reach your own potential. So that would have been the second one. And the third one, I think I would say is that, do you know what? As recently as maybe 4 to 5 years ago, I would never have described myself as a leader, which was quite awkward because, I was a mother and a wife and a mother, and obviously that already makes me a leader in some form. But, I didn't see myself as someone that people would follow, that I'd, chart a path and I'd find people, I look back and actually find people following me. I just didn't think that was me. And this is me 5 years later. I have founded a movement which consists of, a non-governmental organization, a consulting firm, and even a place of leadership in my career, my 9 to 5. And I look back and I see that there are quite a few people following me. It still amazes me today. It's not something I take for granted at all. Because this is someone that I said I never thought. But here I am, and people are looking to me to give them a picture of the future they can pursue. And that is I consider that a privilege, a complete honor, which I do not take for granted at all.
Wow.
I feel it's a commission God has given to me, and I have to treasure it and do my very best with it. So I think those are the 3 limitations I would say I've had to overcome. 3 out of several that I've had to overcome.
Actually, I really appreciate you sharing that, talking about your limitation. To me, I believe limitation is an invitation to become more. That's what I believe. And so I see a limitation as a challenge of being fully who you are. One thing I've been learning of recent is living and thriving in your potential zone, because there are 4 zones in life. The 4th zone is the coasting zone, where people do less than what they've always done. The comfort zone, where they do what they've always been doing, same old stuff. And we have the challenge zone, where you do more, where you attempt to do more than what you've done. And we have the creative zone, where you think more than what you've done. So this creative zone and challenge zone is what we call the capacity zone, the potential zone, or the growth zone. And as long as you're in your comfort zone, there's no growth. My question for you is, because comfort zone make you comfortable, but it doesn't bring growth. There's nothing new coming out of your life, and everything.
Can I just add, Dr. Mike? The more limits you overcome, the larger your comfort zone becomes. I said the more limits you overcome, the larger your comfort zone becomes.
You said the larger?
Because the larger your comfort zone becomes.
You mean the larger? What do you mean?
No.
I said
the more limits you overcome, the larger your comfort zone becomes.
That's true.
Once you're able to break a barrier and you're able to be comfortable doing something you were uncomfortable with prior to that, it's now become another level, another comfort zone.
You have to break out
again.
So
if you're not careful, you have to break out again.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
You're always having to move forward and move higher. Yes,
and that is it. This is what living a life of no limit is all about. Because we basing this podcast on living a life of no limits. To me, I believe to live a life of no limits, you must constantly be stretching like a rubber band. A rubber band is useless when left at its original size. So that stretching is what makes us to live a life. Like, and it's right. You're right, because whatever thing you've done is no longer your potential. It's no longer in your potential zone. And that make you to continue to do more, think more, looking for avenues to upgrade yourself. You are having a kind of much more desire to be, who you are created and to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. My next question for you is this: how did you discover? At what point in your life did you discover that you become aware of your leadership potential? I believe everyone has a leadership potential inside of them. John Maxwell wrote a book called "Develop the Leaders Within You." And I believe if there's nothing within, there's nothing to develop. Everybody has the potential for leadership. So the question is, how did you become aware of your leadership potential? At what time of your life?
Okay, so it's difficult for me to say, and I'll tell you why I say that. Now that I'm older and wiser, looking back at when I had a particularly challenging point in my life, I would say that's the point. If I was more self-aware, I could have recognized that there was something about this that was going to make me be a sort of inspiration, or a someone like a signpost for other people.
Yeah.
So you're aware of my story. You know that when I was in the university, I got into medicine. I started off as a medical student before I switched to another course. Now, I tell the story quite casually, but it wasn't an easy process. It wasn't easy within the school system. It wasn't easy telling my parents at home about my decision. It wasn't easy having to live with people believing that you gave up on a dream, or that you just weren't strong enough to cut it, that you're a coward, essentially, is what it became. People were very concerned about me. My friends at the time, my medical friends, they thought that something had gone on in my head, like something mental. Trust us, Nigerians, now Africans, we believe that started thinking there was something shady. Maybe somebody prayed some prayer for me or whatever, and that was the reason things sort of went off course, not knowing that God was actually putting me on course.
Yeah.
I only knew that because like I mentioned to you, I never thought I was a leadership type of person. I only knew that there was something driving me and that I could not. It was abhorrent to me to stay in that place. So I found the courage, even though I wouldn't describe myself as a courageous person typically, I found the courage to break out of that, to take all the heat that I got, all the mental agony I went through, and made the switch. And the truth is that the difference between me before the switch and me after the switch was like from night and day. It was like literally having scales pulled down from my eyes, the light shining in a dark place, and I could see what I was capable of doing. I started doing things I didn't know I could do. Wow. I became this very mousy person. I became bolder because, like I said, I'd overcome a barrier. I'd done something that was unprecedented for me. And so it was difficult for people to say, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Because if I could survive that, and I did have a lot of encouragement, words of knowledge from the Lord and all that to let me know that I was on the right path. It wasn't like I was just being stubborn. So I felt if I could do that, then there was little I couldn't do.
Yeah. So how did you discover when? So you can't really say at the point that you.
Yes, I would say I couldn't at the point, but I think I can trace. If I'm going to trace something to a specific date, I would say in 2020 when COVID struck and I was at home, and suddenly all the rage, all the annoyance about how people acted in interviews, how they shot themselves in the foot, how they refused to step up to their capacity because they were so fearful of either not getting the job or not achieving someone else's dream of what their career should look like. I think that's when it all culminated. And I said, you know what? We're at home now. People can't really do much. Why don't I start talking about how people can better position themselves for careers they desire? Wow. And that was the first the first session I had, the capacity building session on the application process, teaching people how to write their CVs,
Yeah.
what employers expect and things. I think that was where it took a turn. I actually thought that was all I needed to do the class and go, but then God told me about starting the T3 network, which was don't leave these people like sheep wandering, across it. Be a guide for them, be a shepherd for them. So that's how that started, and started to grow. And from that, other platforms started opening up for me. People started inviting me to share some of this knowledge on their platforms. And I started doing that. And before I knew it, it became something bigger than what I thought it could be.
Let me respectfully stop you at this point, because the kind of audience I reach a broad kind of audience, and people from different continents, Australia, and North America, UK, Africa, Europe. Yeah, so I have a wide reach of audience that listen to this podcast. Now, some people might not really understand what you're talking about. I want you to let people know what you do. I know what you do. I want people to understand, because we talked about how did you discover your leadership potential, because I can trace it back, like you said, to that 2020, 3 years ago. And what is more important in that time is there's something called the Great Resignation. People, because of the pandemic, they have opportunity to reflect. Am I supposed to be doing what I'm doing? So people begin to pull out from their work. They realize that they were not, we're talking about living a life of no limit. People begin to realize that they are limiting themselves. They're in the wrong job and all that. And that's when you came up with T3. And T3, to everyone hearing, means Toyin Talk Talent. So that's when, because you guys just celebrated your third year now, last week. And that's when you begin to talk about talent, how people can reposition themselves. So that's what she was talking about, Toyin Talk Talent. And I really love that concept. And I've watched the progression. You see, a lot of people just start things based on emotion, but I believe yours was based on a vision, and to really, that compassion to help people. So the next question I want to ask is, what price have you paid in developing that leadership potential? So you come to find that out 3 years ago, and you became aware of that potential inside of you, and you stepped up. So what price have you paid in developing yourself? Because most of the time, I like to talk about this, especially in this podcast. Many people, they just think leadership is just something you just wake up and become a leader. They didn't know the price you paid. They didn't know that behind the glory, there's a story. So there's a price point. Anytime you see a leader on stage, either speaking, writing a book, whatever they are doing, that leader has paid the price, and they are still paying the price. Simon Sinek said, leadership is not an expertise, it's an ongoing education. And I want to add, it's an ongoing education that requires an utmost dedication. So tell us, what price have you paid in your leadership adventure? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mike. So just to take a step back, I was going there, I guess I was telling you the process.
Yeah.
At a point, when something begins to hold you and say, this is not entirely it. I was trying to fit myself into the mold of those who had gone ahead of me, because that was what was all over at the time. Everybody was, I don't want to say so, they were helping people with their careers. Then I realized that it wasn't just about teaching people about their careers. It was helping them to recognize that you don't have to do, you have something you want to do that may not be what society expects, or may not be what a vision that somebody else has created for you. But you have the talent that will enable you to fulfill that potential if you're courageous enough to take the step.
Yeah.
So that's when things sort of move from the regular career, general, do this, do A, do B, do C, to the core of my mission, which is helping people understand that you have been equipped with a talent by the God to make your way in life and to fulfill your purpose. So if I was to summarize what we do, I would say that we were equipping and enabling talents to excel.
Wow, I like
that. That is what the vision of T3 is about. So your question was about the price I've had to pay.
Yeah.
I can tell you about, well, the easiest thing would be having to help my family, for instance. This is just one of the more closer to home ones. That because I was always available, I was always there. I didn't have anything else that was distracting me or taking me from home. And now they've had to share me with other people. And that was a bit of a price to pay. And having to find a new normal where I'm able to integrate my family life with my purpose and my mission, that was one price that I had to pay. Obviously, the other price I had to pay in terms of putting aside what I would, I was sharing that with you earlier today, my vision of career advancement in favor of God's vision of my purpose and my mission. That is a big price that I've had to pay because I mentioned to you that if, he, and I don't know why I did it, because, when you have a history with God and he's taking you so far, he's brought you almost at par with your peers. It's like, I've brought you this far, you trusted me this far. Why don't you just trust me, to take you the rest of the way? But I had created this picture of my future, and I had to put that picture aside in favor of what God was taking me to. And I want to add this, because I don't want to give the impression that God is this taskmaster. The truth is this: we have these desires inside of us, and these desires are born of God. Bible says if you delight yourself in the Lord, and I don't want to be too into that sort of thing, but if you have this desire that is so great, it's easy for you to create a picture of what that desire is. You interpret that desire to be something, but it may not be what it's supposed to be. Maybe what you are seeing is much less than what it's supposed to be, because it's what is accessible to you, what you have control over, what you can facilitate by yourself. But if anything is going to make any sort of impact, it has to be beyond you.
That's
you have to, you need other people. You talk so much about going to a place of significance, where it's about what you can do with others for other people. So it's always going to be bigger. So when you are able to create a picture of, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that, you should check it. If it's something all about you, your resources, how far you can go, and there's no risk in terms of who else is going to come into my environment to help me make this thing, to multiply this thing, then you may need to recheck that picture you have in your head. Because it's not meant to be limited to what you can control. Because it's supposed to be you collaborating with others to make it even bigger.
That's a good one.
So I think that was one of the prices I had to pay, and it was a tough one for me. But like you said, the leader, you don't stop. I mean, sacrifice never really stops.
No.
Because you made one sacrifice and then you move beyond it to a place of comfort. Remember, we talked about that earlier. There's the next step, and the bigger and the greater you have to get to. There are other sacrifices and prices you have to pay along the way.
And
I think Dr. Maxwell calls it trade-offs.
Trade-offs.
There's some things you have to trade in favor of where you want to go.
That's good. Actually, there's no finish line to paying the price point and all that. One thing you didn't mention, and I always make leaders to mention, is what financial price have you paid? Because listen, people think leadership is cheap. No, I like to make it plain. For real. Let me tell you, there's a price point. John Maxwell first there's this thing I learned from him. There was a growth kit he bought from Camp Meyer, and the man was asking, do you have a growth plan? That was 50 years ago. And he found out he doesn't have a good growth plan. He was trying to find out from people around him. They don't have one. So it took him and his wife 6 months to scoop out $700 to get that. He said, John Maxwell said, that was the beginning of his growth process. Zig Ziglar said, if you see any person on the mountain, didn't drop down there, he climbed there.
climb this, yeah.
There's a price point. I know an airplane, helicopter can drop someone on the mountain. You don't see it every time. Every mountain climber, they climb. And the climb is a price point. So what does that point look for you financially? Let me be specific.
Oh, wow.
Because people shy away from that. Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know. I guess maybe because, there was let me give an example of what I'm trying to say, then I'll illustrate it. So there was a particular training that I wanted to do, which was an answer to a question I've been asking myself for a long time. I'd long wanted to understand if there was a scientific way of helping people channel their natural abilities into careers that could actually, earn income for them. And so I've been looking for the right kind of training, and I hadn't seemed to find it. Prior to when I did find it, that training costs quite a bit of money. And where I stay in Nigeria, the exchange rate with the dollar is quite astronomical sometimes, especially when it fluctuates so very often. So, but the funny thing was that, and that's why it's so funny, I had been putting money aside for a while. I never knew why. I just told myself, look, if I'm going to live this dream, I'm going to need to financially service it. So I told myself I'd have to put money aside frequently just to keep it there. I didn't know what to do with it. I thought, do I invest it and all? I just had this thing within me telling me, to just hold on, wait. So this year, I saw the reason why I had to wait. So I've spent money on so many trainings that cost me quite a bit in dollars, not my currency, which I've had to spend to equip myself. And I'm nowhere near done. As I sit before you, I've already seen about 2-3 more that I'm going to have to do between this year and next year.
Exactly.
And I've started working towards that as well. I don't want to put a figure on it, but I can tell you that
it's an ongoing
it's quite
price.
a lot. It's quite a lot in terms of financial. And of course, that means that some other things I may want, I'd have to hold off on. Some other things I may want, well, not obviously my family is taken care of by, by God's grace and all, but even things that I'd like to do, I may have had to put it on hold, let's say delayed gratification.
To make a sacrifice.
Yes, for the future. So yes, if you're talking finances, it has been quite an investment.
Exactly. There's an investment of time, investment of money. Wherever you go that is worth going, there's a price tag and there's a price point to pay. Last question for you today. How has mentorship shaped your life, and what has been the role of mentorship to your being effective as a leader? That's my last question for you.
Okay, so I don't know. Sorry if it seems like I'm always prefacing my responses to the story. So there's usually a background. Funny enough, I would have said prior to maybe 5 years ago, I would say I didn't have any mentors. There wasn't anybody I'd say I went to ask questions, to give me answers. So I had to actually pray for mentors. I wanted a mentor, and I wanted people who don't just experts in the field. There's something about having the right mentor where you're not only aligned with where you want to go, but even in terms of your principles, your ethics, values. Thank you. You align as well. And that had always been my concern. I didn't want a mentor for the sake of having one. I wanted someone who aligned with my values. So I would say that my primary mentor till then was actually my husband, who is also a medical doctor. And but he's this sort of person that he has a way of seeing things very objectively. And he was able to actually guide and counsel me. I tell people that what I'm doing today, my husband actually saw it much earlier than I did. He started sharing ideas. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I was the one who was always putting something, I don't know how to do this. Can't you see those who are doing it? I'm nowhere near them, etc., etc. So I would say, is my major cheerleader, and he was my main mentor until a couple of years ago when I got a few more who I'm happy to say share my values, and they've been extremely phenomenal. So in terms of mentorship, I think that mentorship for me has been a treasure I didn't know how to mine until recently. And, not because I took this for granted, but, you always have this a sort of something holding you back and saying, dare I ask, dare I ask, dare I call this person to invest in me? And when you decide to do that, where you actually tell yourself, you know what, I am worthy of that investment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're manipulating anyone or you're forcing anyone, but if there are people who are willing to share from what they've gone through or what they know to make you better, you have to tell yourself, I deserve that. What I have, what I carry is deserving of that investment of time and effort. And I would say mentorship has been amazing to me. Between when I allowed myself to believe I deserved that attention, I deserved that the time and the investment of effort in sharing their own stories and all that. It's been phenomenal. I would say that where I am today is I can attribute a lot of it to mentorship.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so on that note, because many people just think that they don't need any mentor, and Ben Johnson, not the sprinter, but Ben Johnson is an author and writer. He says that he that is taught of himself as a fool for a mentor. That means if you are only self-taught, you have a fool for your mentor. And, I'm mentored by Dr. John Maxwell and also the Maxwell Leadership. And then we have the faculty and all that. I was still in class today. I mean, I still took my mentorship class today on leadership. And every Monday we have a class on business building. And then tomorrow there's a class on coaching. So, and there are different kind of things, personal development, speaking, and all that track. It's something I paid for every year. Why? Because you can't fulfill your role well without a role model. And that's what I want everybody to get here. So how can people connect with you? And, before you go, there's a question I would like to ask, because you already talked about that, and for everybody's information, Toyin started as a medical student. We were in medical school together. And so we both knows how it is to fail, because I failed in the first time I was in medical school. I have to do the exam again. And guess what? The same me that failed in medical school, I have to go through the reproach and shame of going through the exam again. I tell you, I know how it feels.
Yeah.
And I'm now privileged, by the time I do the exam again, I passed, to be the first person that will write a book in understanding medical school. That was 23 years ago. And in that, I partner with 2 distinction candidates. Even though they have distinction, they don't have a vision to write a book. I collaborated with them. But guess what? The second edition of the book is coming out this year. And I'm privileged. I'll be collaborating with 9 distinction students that just finished the exam. I had a Zoom call with them this last Sunday, and they were all excited about it. The only person that was not around in that meeting, she communicated with me today, apologizing, and they are all working together on that project. So what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter what you are facing. So my question for you is this: how has failure shaped your life? How has failure shaped your life? This is one of the 7 questions John Maxwell asks people. So I want to ask you this question before we close. How has failure shaped your life? Thank you.
Failure redirected my life. Prior to that, I'd never failed. I don't fail exams. I was an A student. I did well in everything, which is why I believed that people thought medicine was the way to go, because we believed that people who studied medicine, were really intelligent, etc., etc. So that exam, the one you mentioned that I failed, was what redirected my life. Because had I not faced that failure, I would not have sat down to even consider an alternative to the path my life was following at that time. So I would say failure saved me. Failure redirected me. And it's that failure that opened the vista to everything that I've been able to do up until this point.
Wow.
Does that mean I've not failed since then? Obviously not. That's not what it means. But that specific failure
Yeah.
Was what started writing this chapter of my story. So
That's awesome.
that failure has been phenomenal
That's
in
great.
that
Yeah,
respect.
yeah, really. I want to, in fact, John Maxwell is writing a book on how to reap and harvest from your failure. And I told people, you have not failed when you learn from it.
Yes.
When you don't learn, that's when you are truly a failure. So failure is an event, it's not a person. And in life,
Yes.
if you begin to separate failure and success, I believe people that failed and accept that failure as a label, as a tag, is because they don't continue in the journey. Because if you take an extra step, you are going to meet with success. Yeah. So with this,
I agree 100%.
We have come to the end of this podcast that has been talking about living life without limits. If you want to live a life without limits, you need to get over the fear of failure, because the fear of failure is what is making people not to take risk, not to get out of their comfort zone. And Les Brown said something. He said, the truth is that it's not that people set a aim high and don't hit. He said that people they aim low and hit it. So it's not maybe they set a high aim and miss it, but they aim low and hit it. So it's just a mindset thing. And so we really appreciate you being on this podcast today. And tell us, how can people connect with you? And in case people are listening to you now, watching you, and they really want to connect with you and with what you do. So tell us how people can connect with you. Thank you.
Okay, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where, because that's where the professionals are. So I play mostly there. Oluwatoyin Puddicombe, that's my name right there. You can search for me and find me. I also have a business page on LinkedIn, Toyin Talks Talent. You'll find me on Instagram at Toyin Talks Talent. You'll find me on Twitter at Toyin Talk Talent. You can find me on Facebook as both Oluwatoyin Puddicombe, and I have a group there called Toyin Talks Talent T3 Network. So you can find me on Facebook there, and just send me a DM, and I'd be happy to share the lessons I've learned along this journey. And if you just permit me to say a few words in closing. Now, success is not a destination; it's part of your journey. That is because we define success differently. For someone who took that exam once and passed it the second time, as far as they're concerned, that's success for them. But there's so much beyond that exam, because there's med school proper, and there are giants to slay, hurdles to overcome there as well. So success is part of your journey, it's not a destination. As long as you continue to remove the limits, you will continue to reach higher levels of success. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, thank you so much. And listeners, we always talk about doing is the most important thing, not just knowing. So I want to encourage everyone to apply all these things that we just learned. There's so many lessons thrown out about living a life without limits. Listen, if you want to live a life without limits, you have to go beyond learning. You have to start putting into practice, what you have learned, because it is application that leads to transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel on YouTube and also to your podcast. Until next week, as I come your way with another great leader sharing his or her great journey, this is your host, Dr. Michael Koku, signing off. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.